Dr. Tim H. Cox currently serves as the Interim Dean of Advising and Co-Curricular Programs at Lafayette College. He also serves as the Nakata Region 2 Communications Chair. He brings more than 13 years of experience to enrollment management, student affairs, and academic advising, and previously served as the Associate Director of Advising, Outreach, and Assessment at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Tim is a graduate of the Kansas State University Nakata Master's Program in Academic Advising and earned his PhD with concentrations in higher education and academic advising at George Mason University. His research and presentation interest focuses on how undergraduate academic advisors construct, negotiate, and navigate their identities in the advising relationship. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, great for you to be here. And also joining us is Gerron Scott, who is a senior academic advisor in the Center for Environmental Studies, where he works with students to ensure that they are successful during their journey at Virginia Commonwealth University. He is currently pursuing his PhD in Educational Leadership, Policy, and Justice in VCU School of Education. Mr. Scott has worked with local, state, regional, and national organizations to present workshops on biases, Myers-Briggs, and working with marginalized populations. He currently serves as Nakata's Region 2 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair. Gerron has won multiple awards for his work, including Outstanding Advisor from VCU's University Academic Advising Board and the Leadership in Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Staff and Administrator Award from VCU's College of Humanities and Sciences. In his free time, Gerron can be found riding his bike, taking care of his plants and pets, and spending time with family and friends. Gerron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So with that wonderful introduction of our guest today, I'm just going to want to just jump right ahead and ask one of the first questions. So we'll start with you, Tim, and then we'll go with you, Gerron. What led you into your journey into academic advising and into higher education?
Yes, what led me to the journey 13 years ago. I have to preface this by saying that I earned an undergraduate degree in journalism and mass communication from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Go Hills. I started my career in corporate communications actually in New York City and working in New York, and I realized that there was no passion from the work that I was doing. Prior to that, though, I had taken classes at a community college. I had made connections with the Academic Learning Center. I truly enjoyed my time being in school and always thought that I would come back in some capacity. I did leave corporate communications 2 years afterward, and I was looking for corporate communications jobs in higher education, actually, and found a admissions recruiter position opening at the local community college. And as I was applying, I'm like, oh, great, well, I can use my corporate communication skills to spread the word about the value of a community college education in hope of getting those students to enroll. And while I was an admissions recruiter for 2 years, I also began to develop the academic advising role. Students were asking me questions about which classes to take. And actually, as admissions recruiters, you're supposed to know a little bit about the curriculum. You're supposed to know a little bit more about the concept of the educational experience at the institution. And so from being an admissions recruiter, having a taste of advising, at least in terms of the academic side and curricular requirements, I then transitioned to a student services generalist role at another community college where I had a chance to do a little bit of everything. So admissions, financial aid, student life and activities, testing and assessment, and more specifically, advising. And that's when I fell in love. I was finishing my master's degree in higher education and realized that I wanted a little bit more to develop my career. And I wanted to have an administrative role within academic advising because I was able to get the relational component down. I was able to get the conceptual informational. I was doing a great job, but I also felt that I wanted to oversee some of the advising practices at the institution. So I was accepted into Kansas State / Nakata's master's degree program. And upon graduating, actually landed my first official position in academic advising at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County as the Assistant Director of Academic Advising and Student Success.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, go Cats. Okay, had to say that out loud. And, recently we won our bowl game, just had to put that out there. And Right? So thank you for that. It's just so interesting that your path is very similar to mine, majoring in mass communications, worked in the field, and was like, I have a desire to kind of go back into education, but then using your current skill set and flipping that into higher education. Because I was an advisor for mass communication students, and so kind of starting in that
Oh, look at
pathway.
that. And I
Yeah,
say, listen, advising isn't everyone's job in a sense. So it was
it
great to
is.
be make that connection when I was doing those interviews.
Absolutely. And I love hearing about the community college connections as well. So, Jerron, can you please share with us what led you on your journey into advising in higher education?
So we all have a little bit of mass communications. I minored in mass communications and majored in biology at the
Hey.
University of West Georgia. Go Wolves, the best go West. Um, but my journey was a little different. I was a student leader as well as a first generation student on campus, and I really enjoyed working with other students. I was a MAT mentor, which is a minority achievement program, and just giving back to those students just really made a big difference. And while we wasn't advising, we did a lot of advising adjacent things, even as an undergraduate student. Then one of my mentors said, "Hey, you're involved in Greek life. You were homecoming chair, SGA government. Have you ever looked into student affairs?" So I was like, sure, I'll look into it. And I did, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. I attended University of West Georgia again for my master's, and I just knew, I was like, I want to advise. Once I started learning of the functional roles, I was like, I want to be an advisor. So my first job out of my master's program was actually in Res Life at the Lincoln University of Missouri. So when I worked there, we actually worked with the advising department because it's a very small campus. And I taught a couple of classes for them. I was like, this is great. I really, really, really want to advise. So while I was working in North Carolina, I seen the position at VCU, which was calling for a biology advisor. It's like, hey, I have a biology degree and I have a master's in higher ed. I'm going to apply for this position. Some months later, I was hired, and then the rest just took off. Like I love advising, just getting involved. I knew I wanted to be involved with NACADA right away, so I got as involved as quickly as I can. And just honestly, I love it. I've been able to present at multiple conferences, do a lot of different things through NACADA, but most of all, I really just love helping other people grow. And whether it's students or staff members, just really giving back and saying, hey, this is how we can better ourselves, and this is how we can better the community as a whole.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jerron. But first of all, the best go west. I love that. I know that your your institution is like, yes, represent us. But I just love hearing both of your journeys, because when I also was in student affairs as well. And so when I think about the pathways, right, in terms of, like you were saying, advising adjacent activities, but both of you being very definitive about, I know it's academic advising, I know it's about supporting the student experience. And when we talk about academic advisors understanding the lay of the land and helping students and supporting them in different ways, when I love hearing the way that you've worked in other spaces at the university and how it informs your advising practices. Because I think when we talk to administrators, or when you're thinking about policies, or when you're thinking about how that impacts students, just your various perspectives that have come from where you've been on your campuses really informs that. Tim, from you in admissions and thinking about how that from the front door, right, to the back door. And then Jerron, the way that, from a res life perspective, I always told students, if you don't have peace in your home, how are you going to do well in your classes? And then you being able to recognize that immediately, and being able to support and assist students when they're navigating those transitions. And I don't even have to say chickering to either one of you, because you automatically know about student development theory and what that means and how students show up and all that. So thank you so much for sharing.
And speaking of that, like if we go to Tim, so Tim is in a way connected to the Adventures Advising podcast because he was on an episode of Dane's Desk, who does our YouTube channel videos. And so in that interview, Tim was talking about like the conceptual foundation of where advising stands. And in a way that he coined the term, I think it was intersubjective relative advising approach. I could be wrong.
You said
But,
it. You said it. It's
all
a
right.
mouthful, but you said it.
Can you talk more about it and explain that approach and how you came up with that?
Sure. And, I'm going to say that it's amazing how this kind of came up in our responses to the first question. And so I certainly believe that all three components of academic advising are extremely important, right? The informational, conceptual, and the relational. But I strongly believe that the relational aspect of advising truly allows us to connect with students. This allows us to develop a rapport because a relationship ultimately is based on trust. And students want to be able to trust people who they can go to and expect the accurate information from them. However, we recognize, though, that far too often we have circumstances where students tend not to discuss their academic, professional, and personal goals because there is no connection, but there can be. And so what I've done in my research when I was in graduate school was think about how academic advisors work to connect with their students. And I say this because I talked about my advising philosophy with Dane and mentioned that my advising philosophy is fluid, and I believe that many of our advising philosophies are fluid. It's not about how we approach each student because there is no one size fits all approach. It's about our relationship with students and how we connect with each student separately. And so my research really focuses on how advisors, we construct our identities, or we have them, of course, but we find ways to connect with students in a way to build that sense of trust. And so I'm speaking as when I was coming into academic advising, I took classes at a community college. I was a community college student. That was the identity that allowed me to connect with those students. Gerron was a biology major. He knew how to connect with those students because he knew the craft. We've all been college students. That is the main identity that connects us to students in most cases. And so that's generally what the intersubjective relative advising approach is about. Now, I understand that we don't always have the same identities, but we do have some understanding of what those experiences are that students face. And so the idea with this approach is to, one, introduce yourself, right? Build some type of rapport with the student. Open up the door. Second, learn the context of the student situation. Is it academic related? Is it professional? Is it personal? Is the student experiencing stressors outside of normal discussions? The third one is trying to figure out how you can relate to that. Do you know other stories where students have dealt with similar situations? And then within that, letting the student know either implicitly or explicitly, like, hey, I understand, or I don't understand what you're going through, but let me see how I can get you some type of help. But after understanding all of that and student, seeing that they can trust the individual, you two can work together to determine what the appropriate solution is going to be. And so that's what the intersubjective relative advising approach is. I've coined that for now, certainly looking for shorter names for it. But I think that it kind of encompasses what we mean by position taking and knowing exactly what students are going through while they're navigating their educational experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you say that it's fluid, because it is ever changing in a sense. And also that we are trying to build that rapport with the student. And if we don't have that experience or have that understanding, it's okay to say, like, I'm not understanding, but I'm trying to, and here's who we can connect with. And a friend of mine, and I think I've mentioned too on various podcast episodes, but one of my colleagues said, one of the best questions you could ever ask is, tell me how things are going on in your world right now. And to get them to open up and, get more of that understanding. And it's, and you talk about, we have our experiences, and a lot of it too is just we're human, we're here to have that connection. And I think in a way it can also relate to Gerron, because Melinda, in Gerron's bio, it was mentioned that he's won a couple awards, and one of them was the Leadership and Inclusion, Diversity and Equity Staff and Administrator Award. So there's a YouTube virtual awards ceremony. And in that, Gerron, you had mentioned that a lot of the connections for you was with your grandmother and had such an influence on you. Can you talk about how your grandmother, was an influence and how that connects with you with higher ed and advising?
Yeah, so my grandmother, she was a phenomenal person. She passed when I was about 13. But in those 13 years of that I've got to spend with her, and the stories I hear about her now, she was just always community centered and family centered. She would just talk about, understanding people and giving back. She said, hey, people are different. People may not be similar to you, but always be kind to people. And that was really my biggest lesson that I took away, is just being kind. And I think connecting that to advising is just being kind to our students. working in biology, I have students from 0s to 4.0s, right? And no matter where they are, you still treat them with the same respect and the same care that you would give all students. And that's really what she taught me, was just to approach things with love and care. And love is such a strong word, but I truly do love everybody that I interact with, that I meet, because it is the most powerful force to me in this world, right? When you love somebody and you care about somebody and you want to be kind to them, it allows us to see them as people, right? It allows them to see past their flaws, because we're all flawed, right? So, and it allows us to really just accept them for who they are, and be willing to work with them to get where they want to go. For example, I have some students who are like, hey, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. Now I want to go do something else. And it's really about, okay, let's figure out what else that can do. What else are your passions? What else do you love? Is it, hey, you love riding bikes, or you love, reptiles? I have a snake and a lizard, but you love reptiles. Let's introduce you to someone who's doing herpetology or anything like that. But when you approach it with kindness and care, it really allows that student to see that as well. It's like, this person cares about me, right? They don't just see me as a student. They really see me as an individual, and everybody's unique. I really believe in intersectionality and multi-level intersectionality as well. And that just allows us to really see that person as a unique person. They're not just a first generation student, right? They're just not a international student. They're a person with hopes and dreams like the rest of us. And no matter what identities they bring, we need to respect and honor that they're their own person with their own goals.
Right. No, I love everything that you just shared. And Tim, talking about the piece of just relational, right? Building the rapport and the relationship. I finished a workshop around DEIBA, right? And when you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility, the one thing that I just centered the way that I thought about that is exactly what you both have shared. It's about the relationship of the person that you're building, and the compassion that you're using to see that person as an individual. So, Gerron, can you talk a little bit more about how this your philosophy has shown up in the diversity and inclusion work and the belonging work that you do when you're doing your presentations?
So really, it's about understanding that marginalized identities exist, and we also don't have the proper capability to promote and support all of them, right? But what we can do is we can learn as much as we can. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing, I enjoy reaching out to people in those marginalized identities and saying, hey, I'm doing a presentation on this. Would you like to collaborate? Or here's a chance for you to speak about this particular thing. Because I believe if we're going to be advocates, we need to be beyond allies. We have to be advocates, and we need to push that identity to the front. If we get an opportunity to use our platform, we need to use that to put another marginalized identity in the front. A couple of summers ago, I was able to do some work around Black Lives Matters, and what I've done, I reached out to an African-American woman. I said, hey, this is what's happening. Do you mind giving this presentation on this? Because you are this identity. I am not. While I could give that presentation, it won't be as authentic as finding someone else in that community. And the same thing with LGBTQ plus. I reached out to some colleagues that identify in that community and say, hey, I'm an advocate and I support you, but I cannot understand everything that you go through, especially as a college student. So do you mind giving this presentation? So it's really just about reaching out to people. Then when it's my own personal presentations, it's really trying to get people to understand the uniqueness of everyone and how we can honor that, and how we show up in our identities, how we show up for our students, right? And it takes a level of vulnerability, right? If I'm first generation, I have a disability, I'm an amputee, right? I came from a low income area. So it's really just about showing up in those identities and allowing other people to show up in those identities as well, and realize this is a place of learning. We're going to get things wrong. And I think a lot of people are scared to get things wrong, because they're like, well, if I say this wrong, then they're going to think I'm a bigot or I don't support this cause. But it's really creating an environment to where you can come together and just discuss things and we can learn, right? I think that a noble person does not mind being wrong, right? That's how
Right.
I can really tell if someone's really serious about this, because they don't mind being wrong. But when they are wrong, they take that information that they learn, say, you know what, I'm going to apply that and I'm going to make sure next time I get it right.
Right, Sharon. Oh, yes, I worked with Dr. Jamie Washington, and that was his powerful message of when your positive intentions are true, people will see your heart, and if you make a mistake, people will know that your intentions were pure. So your mistake is not intentional. It was not with malice intent. It was because you were trying, and in trying, we will make mistakes. And so, thank you for echoing that, because when I have these conversations, that is what rings true when people are like, I may mess up, but it's because I'm trying to get it right. So Tim, when we were thinking about how your compassion and philosophy around work around diversity, inclusion and equity and belonging and accessibility, how it shows up in the work that we do, John, which is really echoing, you know, the intentionality and the work that goes behind that in terms of supporting students. And so I didn't know if you had anything to add.
I was going to say, Jerron said it beautifully, which is why we're such a great team and working together. I look at myself and just think about all of the identities that I have. Black male, 37, woo, from Newark, New Jersey, first generation. All of my identities matter. All of our identities matter. And I think that it's just so important to recognize that every advisor is approaching this work from their own different standpoint. I like to talk about intentions versus impact, because that is a big thing, right? And so intentions, we certainly don't intend to make the wrong mistakes or say the wrong thing, but we recognize that there are impacts, right, to the statements that we make and how we approach our students. And so we're learning, right, how to address those impacts, right? If a student is offended, or if a colleague is offended, how do we address that to ensure that we're still creating some type of community where people feel accepted and understood and supported? I think this also lends not necessarily to the work that we've done in Nakata, but also what we're doing in our actual jobs. I'm so glad to be in my role that I'm in now, and which is why I've always sought to progress in the role, because I've always wanted to influence the practices and policies that impact diversity, equity, inclusion at the institutional level. And so I'm shaking the table, and everyone at Lafayette knows that. But if there are policies, right, that are significantly, disadvantaging our historically excluded populations, then we need to be able to address them and figure out how we can help those students, achieve their educational, personal, and professional goals.
Thank you so much. Now we've talked a little bit about how you guys have worked together, and so I'm just going to put the question out there. We talked a little bit about your origin story, if you will, as I think as I think about my love of Marvel. So when we think about how you guys have come from two different spaces, when you think even geographically, talk a little bit about how you guys met and how you guys have started to work together. I would love to hear that story. I know all of us.
Can I go first? Can I go first? I'm not sure what you remember.
I love this. They're like, no, let me go. No, let me go. I love it.
So I'll share the part that I don't think Jerron recognized. Then Jerron, you can share like maybe the fun part. We met at the regional conference in Delaware. I think that was 2018. And I remember it was a huge snowstorm that weekend. I was really deciding whether I was truly going to go or not. I had a couple of presentations, but I wanted to go, got on the road and made it happen. And as I was looking through the schedule, I saw Jerron was doing a presentation on overcoming biases. And so that was actually my first interaction with Jerron. I actually sat in on his presentation and saw that the work he was doing was closely related to my research interests. He did an outstanding presentation, and I walked away with a lot. And I think it's important to recognize, again, as a Black male with my own assumptions, I have my own biases. And so learning how to address those was very significant. So that was my first and saying, you know what, like I want to connect with this person because I believe that eventually we'll be able to do some great work together based on that. Then eventually, I think that I end up connecting with Gerron at our hospitality suite, which was with our Region 2 crew. I love Region 2, R2, shout out to R2. But Jerron, I'll let you handle it from there.
So since there was a big snowstorm, the conference, it had very little attendance because of that. Dover Downs, where it's at, very beautiful place. It was absolutely wonderful. They still did a great job hosting us. So we, everybody was just in the lobby having conversations, and naturally you're looking around like, hey, who looks like me, right? And I ran into Tim and we just started conversing. And from there, we talked about our interests, and they really did line up. It really was like a perfect pairing. Then again, and then we connected again in Atlantic City, right? Yeah, Atlantic City.
Atlantic City.
I want to say Jersey City, but it's Atlantic City. Sorry, people from Atlantic City. I'm going to get it right. And just really from there, just like, hey, let's collab. We're doing a lot of similar things. So we've been able to collab on a lot of different things. Then both of us being on the regional board from NACADA as well, it just allowed us to do a lot of things to help you to really promote students first, right? We're both very student-centered. And just really having an opportunity to do that with a colleague such as Tim, and really during his PhD journey as well, he's been a big support. I've talked to him a lot about it, and as well as several other people. So it really is just really a great relationship. Like we were able to collab and bounce back and forth. We have some upcoming stuff with Region 2 that we're going to launch after our conference. And it's just really been a great sounding board on different things and learning about different populations.
And you have heard me laugh a lot. And the reason why is because NACADA is such an amazing professional association. And it's small enough that really allows you to kind of build relationships with some really close colleagues. And so outside of the presentations, right, where do you go to dinner? Where do you grab a drink? Where do you go to karaoke? And so I was able to connect with Jerron and several other colleagues that way. And sometimes you realize you have more in common when you do go out and have fun. So I am blessed to be part of such an amazing association because I've developed some long-lasting relationships with these people. It's always a fun time with Jerron and I. It was so interesting. We were doing our presentation, maybe our final one of the day, and I think this was on assessment. And Jerron, was getting the audience, participants to engage a bit. And he's like, what have people been doing out here while we've been in Cincinnati? And someone said something about karaoke, and he was like, oh my gosh, I remember you performing, Tim. Like last night, I saw you like walking around the crowd. But that's what we do. And I think that really allows us to not necessarily like connect as friends, but also as colleagues as well. It's the professional side of it, but it's also the fun side.
Yeah. I would say NACADA has been its home, right? I wanted to be a member of NACADA, but when I joined, it really is home. It is honestly my favorite professional association because it's so small. It's still a lot of people, but it's small enough to where, if you don't see someone for a year, they still remember you, right? We've seen people at Nationals in Louisville that I connected again with Cincinnati, then people at their different regional conferences as well. And it really is a beautiful association. Karaoke was really fun. I forgot the name of the place in Cincinnati, but it had the word kitty in it, I think, right? So I remember, but it's karaoke place. It was strictly karaoke. But it was honestly just a great opportunity. And we ran into Matt randomly. He was sitting down and he was with Tim, and I walked over and he was like, hey, we were like, hey, you do the advising podcast. He was like, yeah, I do. Do you guys want to be on it? I like the work that you're doing, right? So it really is just a beautiful space and opportunity. I love it.
Yeah, literally, I was just sitting there.
See us in
yeah, absolutely. I was literally just sitting there, and then they come up, and we were just talking about presentations, and they were literally right about to go into one of their presentations that they did, but they took the time to just like have a chat, and we got to know one another, and it was like, hey, do you want to be on the podcast at some point? And it's like, absolutely, let's do it. So and Melinda, we've talked about this too, about like the randomness of just meeting somebody, and it's just making yourself out there, and whether it's going to karaoke, sitting next to someone, going to a presentation, you're able to build these connections and these friendships. But I gotta ask Melinda, do you do karaoke?
I do.
All right now.
I do. And you know what? And it's funny because I think about the Region 2 connection that is here right now. And what I share with Matt about being a former, well, Matt's currently a Region chair, and I was a former Region 2 chair. And so when we're talking about karaoke, I was like, those are my people. Those are my people. But I wish I could sing though. That's the thing about karaoke. It doesn't matter. And that's why I love it so much. People just want you to have fun and enjoy yourself. And I think that that's also what I love about Nakata, like you were saying earlier, the community, and you're always welcome. And you're always going to have a community that stands behind you and supports you. So being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you help me here? Or, hey, I need this here. Or I'm looking at this policy, the crazy checks. I love my shout out to Faye Howard. When I was going through my dissertation presentation, I called her up and she really helped me through that last final stretch. So, and I met Faye at VCU, so and she was in Region 2 as well. So there's all those things that just kind of you keep with you, and I completely echo everything that you shared. And so I just hope those who are listening, who are members, and those who are thinking about being members, really understand that what we love about the field is also the things that we can do for ourselves, in the sense of the community and the enrichment that we provide in terms of professional development, but then what we're also able to give back to our students. So I just really love hearing all this conversation. It really makes me laugh, because now I want to challenge you guys to a karaoke battle, or something. Look at Jerron laughing, like I'm serious. Like it's gonna go down. It's gonna go down in Portland. So
well, maybe even before that. So Tim and Jerron, so Melinda has a plan to go to all 10 region conferences. So there could be a Region 2 karaoke battle, and then continue it in Portland in the annual conference in October.
Absolutely.
I think all the regions need to do karaoke, and they need to present the winner. So in Portland, we can have a karaoke off. So if you're listening from every region, make sure at the regional conference, you get some karaoke done so we can have a karaoke off. And the person who wins, they're automatically the best advisor in the country.
Watch out, because I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you all.
Oh, well, come on, bring it. Look, Region 2 is in Norfolk, which is right in my back door because I'm in Chesapeake. So come on, bring it. Let's do this.
It's got to be official. There's got to be a trophy at the end. They got to win something.
Yes, you have to win something. I love that idea. Everybody presents their best karaoke artist. And what is the name of that show? I guess it was kind of like Karaoke Battle or something like that. We can set it up like that.
Lip Sync for Your Life.
The Masked Singer, is that it?
No, it's like like what was the celebrities that were doing the karaoke, and then they would dress up and everything like that.
The Masked Singer.
Yeah. Was it the Masked Singer? I thought it was like LL Cool J was hosting or something though. There's so many.
I don't know.
I think that's like a lip sync battle. It might be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean like set up like that, and then you can vote, and then they go on, and then look, we're gonna have to sketch out after the podcast. But I love this idea.
I feel like we're combining all these like singing shows together into one.
But my mom does love watching The Masked Singer, though. I haven't gotten into that one. There's so many shows now.
There is.
I love it. But Tim, you set the challenge. It's on, like Donkey Kong. Me. Let me get it together. Me.
So aside from the karaoke, like in Cincinnati, both of you were presenting a lot. And so you presented a lot together as well. And I think it would be great to use this time to talk about some of that. So do you want to start with one of the presentations that you both presented on? So maybe we can talk about the bringing our own intersecting identities and experience into the advising relationship, how that came about, and what that presentation, what it all involved.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting because once you start doing the work, you try to figure out the best way to disseminate the information to the larger associations and eventually the institutions across the world. And, obviously writing the journals is great, and that's pending right there. There's some drafts underway. But I think the best way to truly engage advisors into learning how we can bring our identities and experiences into the advising relationship is to do that via a presentation. And so the fact that Gerron and I have done similar work in the past, this was, I think, our first time that we actually presented together, because he had so much knowledge about biases. And I know that that's actually some of the barriers that I believe that we have when kind of thinking about our identities and experience and connecting with students. So it was great to kind of have him and add that additional perspective to the group. But our presentation was divided into maybe like 3 or 4 parts. And I actually used a lot of the exercises that I used in my dissertation, which was great. So it really wasn't reinventing the wheel, but I always like seeing the differences. And the first part was the who am I? And this is an artistic representation of how advisors see themselves in relation to their students. And it's so funny, the types of pictures that these advisors were drawing. Some of them were drawing, balancing, coffee, pets, children, while understanding that they have advisors on the other line. We had people drawing like rainbows. We had people drawing ladders. We had people drawing bridges, because we all see ourselves as significant into helping the student develop their educational goals. That was great. Then we did a deeper dive, and this allowed the advisors to really look at their identities beyond the big 8, right? Because beyond race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation, but really to start to highlight their personal identities, things that are visible and maybe not visible to students, because we also connect in certain ways. So if I am connecting with a student who identifies as Asian, no, we don't have that same, social identity, but we're both athletes. Well, great. I can bring that into the conversation. If the student is saying, hey, here's what I'm struggling with as a veteran, then maybe another advisor can say, oh, my son was a veteran, or my daughter was a veteran. And yes, I know what students are going through, and I can connect you to the appropriate office. So it really was about that. I'll say that we did have the audience share their artistic representations, but we did allow them to keep the deeper dive separate, because there are some identities that we like to try to keep hidden. But we also recognize that there are barriers, and some of them professional barriers that also have us brush those identities under the rug as well. And that was kind of our third exercise, is really kind of recognizing when those identities present barriers or bridges to the advising relationship. And it really allowed the audience to ask questions to say, hey, I am, a person, I am, a white woman working in a department where I support Black males. How do I get to them that I am trying to support them and that I understand them? It was such a fruitful conversation, because often, right, we have, we put together these support teams and support groups, and representation matters. I'm not going to deny that. But it doesn't mean that just because we don't have the same identities on the surface that we can't connect. Students care. As long as they feel supported and understood, you will develop that sense of trust and rapport with the students. So that's what we really wanted to kind of identify with that. We had such positive feedback from that presentation that, and I don't want to like overstep, because I know John is about to speak next, but we're going to do a pre-conference where we combine the bringing our identities and advising to relationship and the biases all together, because they wish that they would have had more time. And it was that engaging. It was so fun, because the artistic representation is something different that you don't really see in a lot of the presentations, but also the discussion where everybody was able to be vulnerable. We were able to trust ourselves. What happened in that room stayed in that room, and we were able to grow together.
Yeah, I would just add, with connecting with students, we often try to look at those big 8 intersectionality things and say, I have this whale of identities. I don't match up with the student here. And it goes really beyond that. One of the things I always tell advisors, ask them what they like to watch or what they like to do, right? I guarantee if you ask enough questions, you're going to find something in common, right? One of those things I ask is like, hey, what animes are you watching, right? If I see someone with an anime shirt on, be like, hey, let's talk about Attack on Titan. The comic ended a little weird, but hopefully the TV show corrects it, right? And just really allowing yourself to do that, right? I have some like figurines and like you, Matt, in the background in my office as well, and it's just really about those small little things that students can pick up on, right? They feel a little more comfortable when it's like, hey, I know we're both Black, but that doesn't mean that we have anything else in common, right? So let's find what else that we have in common, right? Do we like sports? Do we like reading? One of the things, I was a biology major. One of the things that I had in common with all my students is I've sat in your seat, right? I've done organic chemistry. I stayed up for seemed like 24 hours studying for these tests, right? So it's just really those small little things that I think sometimes we overlook.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I'll be quiet. But I think that, Gerron, you hit it on target about how our identities and our experiences show up outside of who we are, as well as also in our offices or in our spaces. So what does your office say about you, right? What do students see when they come in? Do they see the photos of the family? Do they see the Power Ranger helmet in the background and say, oh, okay, here we go? Like, that is what allows students to truly connect. And so that was the true purpose of the presentation. It was great.
Oh wow, I love that. That's so powerful when you are talking about connecting on that individual level that you spoke about earlier, because it's that human connection, right? And I think it is powerful that even if somebody was to come in the room and they see me and they think, oh, okay, oh, she's African American just like me, that doesn't mean that we may have anything in common, right? You may make assumptions about me just based on the fact that I'm a Black female, but that might be the end of it, right? Where I might have more in common with somebody else, right? Just because we like similar things. And so thank you so much for expanding on that. But I think it also goes back to the idea of asking questions, right? Looking for that, and people not feeling it. I don't want to ask the wrong question because I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to come across or do something wrong to destroy the relationship before it even begins. And so I think a lot of people are looking for, how do I do that well in a way that I strengthen the relationship with my students and I don't, stop it before it starts. And so I think that what you're doing and how you're presenting it helps to give people tools and a pathway to get there, because sometimes they don't know where to start.
Right. And I just wanted to say, to the relative part of this approach, is that sometimes it's not about just the identity, it's about the human experience. And so we're thinking about sadness. We all know what that means. We know about grief. We all know what that feels like. We know about happiness. So share when the student is coming to you with good news. Great, be happy with the student. If the student tells you that they lost a loved one, we know what that feels like. That's the type of compassion and relativity that we're talking about in this approach, because it definitely matters. And if we can connect with students on that level, it makes so much of a difference.
Yeah, and I know we all have appointments coming up, and we were able to get this time in, and I know we had some more things that we wanted to talk about with this episode, but I think this means that Melinda and I have to have you both on for another episode later on down the road, if you are both up for it.
Always up for it.
Sounds good. And then, of course, hopefully both get to see you at the Portland conference in October. So that's going to be fun. And if anyone's listening that they're like, I want more information, or I have some questions or a comment, how can they reach out to you?
So I can be reached at grscott2 at vcu.edu. Also on LinkedIn, Gerron Ryan Scott. I'm a big fan of using LinkedIn for those connections as well. And I would love chatting with folks. If you ask a question, I love to just have a conversation with you about anything.
Absolutely. Same with me. LinkedIn, I'm Tim H. Cox. I like to use my middle initial a lot, because there's a lot of Tims out there. So Tim H. Cox is how you find me on LinkedIn. Via email, it's coxt@lafayette.edu. And I serve as the Region 2 Communications Chair, so I'm also monitoring a lot of the posts in our Facebook group. And so if anyone has any questions, I'm always looking at that. We're more than happy to connect.
Sweet. So go Region 9 for me, and Region 2 for all of you, and every other region in Nakata. So thank you, Gerron and Tim, for being on the podcast with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for all of us, right, who are Nakata members, we all win, because you guys are amazing members. And I just want to thank you all for the work that you continue to do to support your students. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. I greatly appreciate being here.
Thank you so much, Matt and Melinda. This is exactly what we're talking about in terms of developing those relationships. We met once in Cincinnati, and look at us now. We're already thinking about our karaoke competitions. In Portland.
Absolutely.
We're going to make that happen.
That's right.